Putting the team on his rock-solid right arm, Geno Smith put the dagger in the Lions in overtime to cap off a thrilling 37-31 win at Ford Field. I'm going to be breaking it all down on our weekly postcast of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A special thanks to all the 12s out there, whether you're listening nearby in Lansing, Michigan. We actually have a lot of Michigan fans that listen to the show, or if you're nearby in the Pacific Northwest in Gig Harbor, Washington. We greatly appreciate making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks stepping up to the plate, bouncing back in resounding fashion. What a back and forth affair that it was today at Ford Field. The Lions had the lead 14-7 going into the half, and the Seahawks turned the tables after what happened last week when they had the halftime lead and the Rams came out and punched them in the mouth several times in the second half. The Seahawks were able to do that, not quite the same fashion in the sense they didn't go with 23 unanswered points. The Lions continued to put points to the board, and they made this a very difficult game. But in the end, the Seahawks found a way to get the job done in overtime, and it all starts with number 7 under center. For those of you that have questioned Geno Smith's ability to win games when it matters in clutch situations, he silenced all those doubters today with an incredible drive to close out this football game. Now, I'm going to have this caveat to mention here. We'll mention the one bad play that Geno Smith made in this game. It actually happened at the end of the fourth quarter when Smith rolled out and was trying to get away from pressure and ended up taking a 17-yard sack deep in Seahawks territory. It basically gifted the Lions incredible field position to go down and kick the game-time field goal. But you take that play out of the equation. Geno Smith, as he said to reporters after the game, he just let that play out of his brain, forgot about it, moved on, came out and goes 6 for 7 for 69 yards, hits Tyler Lockett for the game-winning touchdown, and he completed passes to 4 different receivers on the game-winning drive. You look at the numbers that he put up in this football game, and he was just simply spectacular all day long. 328 passing yards, 78.8% completion percentage, and 2 touchdowns. Geno Smith was absolute money for the Seahawks, especially in that overtime period when he was able to connect on all but one pass, nearly 70 yards passing. He's getting tight ends involved, Tyler Lockett involved, even tried to get the ball to his running back, Ken Walker III. But I think that the thing we really need to talk about coming out of this football game, Geno Smith did a phenomenal job. This was one of his best performances in a Seahawks uniform, going out throwing for over 300 yards, completing almost 80% of his passes in complete command. But all week long, and Pete Carroll mentioned this, he could say he doesn't read any articles from writers or whatever, but clearly he does, because he said, so many people did not expect our backup tackles to be able to come out and get the job done. Well, Jake Curhan and Stone Forsythe were absolutely sensational today. And I know that sometimes that word can be thrown around as hyperbole, but they were fantastic. Just how good were these two today? Really the offensive line, and I'll talk more about it as we get deeper into the show, but Geno Smith did not take a quarterback hit in the entire first half. And until that sack that I mentioned at the end of the game, that wasn't because of pass protection. That was just him trying to do too much to extend the clock and try to make it that the Lions wouldn't be able to run a play before the 2-minute warning. That was his logic behind it. He said he would have thrown the ball away if he could do it again. But until that play, they had not gotten a single hit on him. And there were a few times that there was pressure on him, and Geno Smith did a nice job moving in the pocket, using his feet, scrambling to avoid pressure. That's what great quarterbacks do. But Jake Curhan and Stone Forsythe were fantastic today. They did not allow pressure when the Seahawks were able to do so. They provided tight end and running back help, particularly early in the game. It did feel like as the game went on, though, that Shane Waldron started to call plays more with confidence in those two, not bringing in tight ends to help out quite as much, and they were able to get away with it. And this Lions pass rush has some dogs on it, Aiden Hutchinson being the star of that group. And really, aside from the final play where Curhan may or may not have held Hutchinson, it's a play that sometimes gets called, but away from that play, he was extremely quiet this entire game because Jake Curhan did a fantastic job of slowing him down. And I thought Stone Forsythe did a great job in pass protection. You look at the run game as well. One of the critical plays in this game, in the second half, the Seahawks had 4th and 1 in their own territory. The Lions had just scored, had the lead, and Pete Carroll decided we're going for it here. Ken Walker gets 3 yards, mainly because of the block that was made by Jake Curhan at the right tackle position. He drove his defender several yards off the ball. So I thought that the backup tackles were absolutely spectacular in this game. And the expectations were pretty low. The way those two played, particularly Curhan last week, coming in for Abraham Lucas, he gave up 4 pressures on 9 pass protection snaps against the Rams. He just didn't look comfortable, but you have a full week to game plan as the starter. And I thought the Seahawks did a really good job of getting a lot of quick passes early in the game, but they were able to get some shots downfield because the confidence grew for both these players as the game went on, and they have played a fair number of snaps in the NFL. It's not like these guys are completely unproven. They've gotten some opportunities. Curhan started 5 games as a rookie. Stone Forsythe started a game for Lucas last year at right tackle. So they had confidence in these guys, and after last week, it was tough for fans, and even on our show, we had some skepticism about how these guys were going to play, but they did a fantastic job. So kudos to those two players. I think that was the biggest storyline on offense coming out of this game, the ability to protect Geno Smith against this really talented front line for the Lions. They did a good job of keeping him clean for most of the game, and that led to the victory. As far as the defensive side of the football, it's a little bit more of a mixed bag, but I think it was a much better game than last week, particularly when you're looking at the timely turnovers. Trey Brown with a sack and a pick 6 on consecutive plays in the fourth quarter. That gave the Seahawks a 31-21 lead. At that point, it seemed like the Seahawks may have this game in the bag, but if you watch the Seahawks and Lions play the last couple of years, you know that no lead is safe with Jared Goff on the other side. This team has a lot of weapons on offense. 2 4th-down stops. Devin Witherspoon was in coverage on both of them, had a pass breakup on the first one in the first half. The second one, fans were upset there wasn't a pass interference call, but it looked like it was inadvertent contact where the guys just got their legs tangled up, and that happens. They decided not to call it. And Jaron Reed recovering a fumble forced by Uchenna Nwosu early in the second half. Seattle went down and got a touchdown off that to tie the game at 14. So those timely changes, we're talking really what accounts to 4 turnovers, getting 2 4th-down stops in this game, plus the interception. Technically, Seattle had one other turnover at the end of the first half when Trey Brown knocked the football out of Amon-Ra St. Brown's hands. But that one really didn't matter in the scheme of things because there wasn't going to be any time on the clock after that. But still, it was a great game in the sense of the Seahawks defense. Even though they bent, they gave up a lot of big plays. They gave up 6 third-down conversions on 11 opportunities. Again, they still have room to work there, but they were able to get their pass rush going some. They were able to create some turnovers in the second half of this game in particular and get the football back in Geno Smith's hands and let him do his magic, distributing the ball to all his different receivers, his tight ends. The run game didn't have great numbers in yards per attempt, but there were still some really nice runs from Ken Walker. I thought Charbonnet played really well in his opportunities. So overall, this game was about Geno Smith, the protection for him, and the fact that the defense was able to find ways to get key stops. Even though they weren't playing great football necessarily, they were giving up a lot of yards, they were giving up long drives, they were finding ways to get those quick, sudden change turnovers and get the football back into Geno Smith's hands. And getting 7 points off of one of those turnovers certainly didn't hurt either with the Trey Brown interception. Coming up next, I'm going to be looking at my weekly game balls. Who gets the award on offense, defense, and special teams? We'll get to that here in a moment on our post-game edition of Locked On Seahawks, which is brought your way by our friends over at Game Time. If you've ever been on the hunt for sports or concert tickets the last minute, such as when I was looking at Seattle cracking playoff tickets this past spring, the process can be anxiety-provoking. Buying tickets to your favorite events should be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you with killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee. You can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. If you're wanting to see the Seahawks at home next week against the Panthers and have an itch for putting together a last-minute road trip, use Game Time's awesome flash deals feature and a detailed stadium map to get seats for under $70 right now. It's super easy. Forget the planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event, and the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem Locked On NFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. You're listening to the post-game edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5, sometimes 6 days a week in the case with our post-game episodes. We greatly appreciate it. Don't forget, tomorrow I'll be rejoined by Rob Reagan. The two of us will dive into our Victory Monday musings, some in-depth takeaways coming out of today's thrilling win over the Detroit Lions. You won't want to miss it. Let's get to our weekly game balls, shall we? And I'll admit, on offense, I was very close to making this a co-game ball for Jake Curhan and Stone Forsythe, because I think that was a huge deal for Seattle to be able to put up 37 points, and really it was 30 points on offense. But for them to be able to do that, they needed the offensive line to play so much better than it did in the second half last week against the Rams with those backup tackles in, and they just couldn't get anything going. 12 total yards. But I got to give some credit to a guy that has been one of the best receivers in the NFL for such a long time. And I know that it's becoming cliche to say it, but Tyler Lockett is the most underrated player in the NFL. All the guy does is just consistently, week in, week out, go out and put up big numbers, find his way into the end zone. And he was pivotal to Seattle's win today over the Detroit Lions. 8 receptions for 59 yards. That's not the best stat line that he's ever had, but 2 touchdowns in the second half. He had the game winner in overtime. And let's talk about that first touchdown reception. And one of the other reporters today was asking Lockett in the press conference room after the game what his secret was for always in the red zone, seeming to come open on those bootlegs on the opposite side of the field. And of course, he wasn't going to disclose that information at a press conference, but he is so masterful at doing that. And he did it again, going on a crosser to the other end of the field away from the bootleg. And then Geno Smith drops a perfect ball in the bucket. And you can see the acrobatic footwork by Tyler Lockett, the over the shoulder. I know a couple years ago, he said he didn't know who Willie Mays was, but again, emulating Willie Mays out there with that catch, getting both feet down in bounds. And that really was a momentum changer for the Seahawks. And then at the end, or after the end of regulation in overtime, you have Geno Smith rolling out, trying to get away from pressure. He successfully gets away from Aiden Hutchinson with Jake Curhan getting beat there, and he's able to get to his trusty receiver on the out route. And Lockett, not somebody that typically is going to stretch the football out for the pylon, but in this instance, the tackler was not going for the football, so he reached out, got the football on the inside of the pylon, and it's game over. So another fantastic game for Tyler Lockett, who really said game match point in overtime with his outstanding route running and just the ability to always seem to be open at the right time, coming through in the clutch with Geno Smith. So a fantastic game for Tyler Lockett. He is my week 2 offensive game ball winner. On the defensive side of the football, there was no debate on this one. Trey Brown, what a bounce back. And really the storylines are endless when you're talking about Trey Brown here, because he started last week against the Rams, and he was actually on my 3 down last week. He struggled in that game against the Rams, missed tackles, missed opportunities in coverage. It was really a rough game for him against the Rams, but talk about bouncing back. Reek Woolen goes out in the first half with a chest injury. Doesn't sound like it's overly serious, but he didn't return to the game. Seattle plugs Trey Brown in, and he mentioned this after the game. He had never had a game in his entire football career where he had a sack and an interception. He did that in today's game on back-to-back plays. They sent him on a corner blitz. He was the first sack of the year. He had the first sack of the year for the Seahawks on Jared Goff. And then on the very next play, he goes into a cover 2 look, and he reads the Texas route from Jahmyr Gibbs, perfectly positioned, squeezes the ball down, and Jared Goff throws a gift-wrapped interception. By the way, Goff had not thrown a pick for more than 390 pass attempts at that point, dating back to last year. One of the top 3 longest stretches in NFL history. Trey Brown happily ended that streak with a pick 6, returned it 40 yards to give the Seahawks a 10-point lead. He also had that forced fumble. Again, it was with time not being on the clock at the end of the first half, but talk about a great game for him. He did give up a touchdown in coverage late in the football game to allow the Lions to crawl back into it eventually to force overtime. But overall, he was extremely disruptive, had that sack. The pick 6 was a critical play for Seattle to be able to get the lead, extend the lead, and to be able to eventually win this football game. So great performance from him, especially considering he lost his starting job in this game with Devin Witherspoon getting a start at left cornerback. For him to come back in on the right side and play the way that he did, big play Trey came through with heroics for the Seahawks on defense. So he gets the game ball. And on special teams, I'm going to admit this is the first time that I've been doing this for 2.5 years with a post-game show where I was almost ready to scrap one of the game balls because I just felt like the Seahawks were not very good on special teams today. Jason Myers struggled. There were some missed tackles. There was a big punt return, but there was one kid that did stand out today, and it's not just because he was wearing one of the blue ski masks in the locker room after the Seahawks won the game. I mean, we'll give him some credit for that swagger, but Jared Reed is going to be the game ball recipient here. He had a tackle that he made on a punt to Khalif Raymond, where he blew Raymond up for no gain at the 12-yard line. It was a fantastic open field tackle. He had another tackle on special teams as well. Seattle didn't have any other players that were credited with special teams tackles in this game. Jarek Reed had both of them. And so by default, with the way the other players played, the fact that he did have a really nice open field tackle on punt coverage, Jarek Reed gets his first game ball in a Seahawks uniform. And I've been impressed with what I've seen from this kid these first couple of weeks. He had some nice special teams plays last week against the Rams, so this was much deserved. Not a game that I think that coordinator Larry Izzo is going to be overly excited about when he goes back and watches the film, but I thought Jarek Reed's second played really well for the Seahawks in this football game, getting the special teams game ball. Coming up next, I'm going to shift gears over to our weekly 3-up, 3-down, which players shined for the Seahawks in their road victory over the Lions and which players have plenty of room to improve going into next week's Week 3 matchup against the Carolina Panthers. I'll get to those here in a moment on our post-game edition of Locked On Seahawks, which is brought your way by our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. This week on Prize Picks, I did have DK Metcalf going for over 75 receiving yards, and he came up just short of that mark. Derrick Henry, I had going for 80. He did exactly that in the Titans game. So a mixed bag this week with my picks. Prize Picks is an absolute blast each week, and it's an easy way to enjoy daily fantasy without any hassle and land quick winnings. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedInNFL and use the code LockedInNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedInNFL and use the code LockedInNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. You're listening to the post-game edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there for listening in here, whether you're listening in on the East Coast or you're listening over in the Seattle region. It's an early show with us being on the East Side playing in Detroit, but for each and every one of you, greatly appreciate you making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Coming up tomorrow, Rob Rang and I will have our first Victory Monday musings of the 2023 season. We'll be looking back at what went right for the Seahawks, and of course, we'll discuss some things maybe that didn't go right. This was far from a perfect game for the Seahawks, but we'll have some in-depth takeaways coming out of this matchup after reviewing the film, so make sure that you are tuning in and listening to that live show coming up tomorrow on Locked On Seahawks. All right, it's time for our 3-up, 3-down, and the Seahawks getting their first victory of the season, a 37-31 overtime win over the Lions, a thrilling victory. They actually were trailing at halftime, a little bit of a reversal from a week ago when they were ahead of the Rams at halftime, and then everything unraveled. This week, they were able to right the ship, had a productive half on offense, created some big turnovers in this game, got the 7 points from Trey Brown on the pick 6 in the early part of the fourth quarter as well. There's a lot of candidates for 3-up, and I want to start. I'm actually, I'm not going to say this is cheating, but I think this is a game where there were position groups that really stood out. And first and foremost, let's give credit to this offensive line. And there's more storylines here than just the fact that Stone Forsythe and Jay Curhan were playing for Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas. That was obviously the biggest concern for the Seahawks going into this game. Are they going to be able to run their offense effectively with 2 backup tackles in? They not only did that, they put up close to 400 yards of offense. They were very efficient in the passing game. They had some solid run plays. Even though I think the Lions did a really good job bottling up Ken Walker III most of this game, he was able to break free sometimes. And there were some really key short yardage conversions in the run game as well. But Evan Brown banged up his knee early in the game. Oluwatimi came in for Ken Walker III's first touchdown on the opening drive when Seattle went up 7-0. He was in on that play and got some good push. He got a handful of snaps, so the rookie got some action. Evan Brown comes back into the game, and he guts it out for the rest of the game with a banged-up knee. So that made it even more impressive. But Seattle had one quarterback hit and one sack. They were on the same play, and that was not on the offensive line. That was just Geno Smith running around trying to eat up time, and he should have thrown the ball away. You take that out of the equation, he wasn't hit a single other time the rest of this game, an overtime game at that. So credit to the offensive line. I thought they did a phenomenal job. And the Seahawks clearly did a good job game planning this week for that, especially early on, getting your tight ends and running backs involved, chipping, helping out your tackles. But as the game went on, as I mentioned earlier, I felt like they didn't do that as much, and they didn't have to. The confidence grew in those tackles as the game went on, and I thought the guards played well. I thought Evan Brown played well. Across the board, pass protection was near perfect most of this game, and it allowed Seattle to run its entire offense the exact opposite of what we saw in the second half last week against the Rams. So kudos to those offensive linemen for their contributions today. And then I want to go to another position group on offense, the tight end group. And last week we got to see some plays from the tight ends, but it was a quiet day for Noah Fant and Colby Parkinson. But you look at the stat line today coming out of this game for the Seahawks. They got 4 catches for 56 yards, including a 31-yarder from Noah Fant, one of the longest throws of the day for Geno Smith. Parkinson had a 21-yard catch on the final game-winning drive, 2 catches for 41 yards. Will Dissly, 3 catches for 35, had a nasty stiff arm that he threw on one of the defenders for the Lions to get extra yardage on a first down catch. He keeps coming through with key receptions the last couple of weeks. So the tight ends with well over 100 receiving yards, they were crucial to getting this offense going. And as I mentioned several times already, they were also key for the pass protection because early on, especially, they were counted on to help those tackles out. And I thought all 3 of these tight ends did a really good job. The run blocking was not as good from this group, but they were helping in pass protection really well. It was keeping Geno Smith clean. And obviously, you get over 100 receiving yards from that group. They were integral to getting this offense rolling after that really rough second half last week. So the tight ends, to me, the entire group is on 3 up this week because they were fantastic. They were game changers for this offense. And last but not least here, he was on my 3 down last week in his Seahawks debut. Really felt like he was not on the field, even though he played quite a few snaps. It was a really quiet debut for Draymond Jones, and he was not getting it done early in this game either. But once things started to click, he had a pressure on Jared Goff late in the first half that led to a holding penalty. It was 3rd down. The pass ended up being incomplete anyway, and the Lions had to punt the ball. But that kind of got this pass rush going. Before that point, they didn't have any quarterback hits on Jared Goff. It felt like a nightmare was replaying from last week with Matthew Stafford, where they just couldn't get any pressure. But that play by Draymond Jones got this pass rush going. And in the second half, they had 7 quarterback hits on Jared Goff. They didn't have to play on defense in overtime, so this was just 3rd and 4th quarter, but they had 2 sacks, one of them by Trey Brown. The other one was by Draymond Jones, and he was just very active. You watch the run plays for Seattle today as well. There were several plays where he helped open up teammates to be able to come downhill and make plays. So I thought Draymond Jones, we got to see the difference maker the Seahawks thought they were bringing in. And I asked Pete Carroll about this today. I asked Bobby Wagner after the game. You're starting to see the chemistry with that defensive line. You have to remember going into the season, Jared Reed, Draymond Jones, and Mario Edwards had never played together, and they didn't get many snaps in the preseason. So this is a group that is still growing, but I'm very encouraged by what we saw because this is a good Lions offensive line. Even without Taylor Decker, their interior line is really good. They've got an excellent right tackle in Penei Sewell. So I'm encouraged by the fact that we saw this pass rush come to life today, and Draymond Jones, I thought, was a big part of that from the interior, getting his first sack as a Seahawk in a crucial moment for Seattle as well. Now, flipping the gears over to the 3 down in a victory, typically it's harder to find guys that had rough games, but this was far from a perfect game for the Seahawks, and I thought there were a handful of players that had difficult games. Now, I am going to put somebody in the middle here, Devin Witherspoon. He's not 3 up, he's not 3 down, but in his debut, We got to see the couple of fourth down stops. He had a couple nice open field tackles, but he also got baited bad on a flea flicker, gave up a 30-plus yard touchdown to Khalif Raymond. That is a learning moment for him that he's going to have to grow from. So Witherspoon doesn't go on either end of the list, but I did want to mention him because there were some really fun flash plays from him. There were also some big rookie mistakes from him. But looking at the 3 down, I want to start on special teams, and I don't want to beat a dead horse because this is something I have brought up several times on this podcast. I've wrote articles about it. Jason Myers and the very mysterious discrepancies between even and odd seasons. He has been a Pro Bowl, all-pro level kicker in even years. Odd years, he has been way worse. It's been a Jekyll and Hyde thing. He had a 73% field goal percentage 2 years ago during the 2021 season. He was barely over 80% in 2019, his first year with the Seahawks. The 2 other years he's been in Seattle, the even years, he's been over 90% in both those seasons. And unfortunately, that trend, that wild trend year to year, the radical changes in effectiveness. He missed 2 field goals in the first half that easily could have cost the Seahawks this football game. They wouldn't have gone to overtime if he would have been able to make both those field goals or even one of them. Lions would have had to score a touchdown to win the game. So ultimately, those didn't end up coming to backfire, but he missed a field goal that was pivotal last week. Seattle should have scored on all 4 of their drives. He's 3 for 6 to open the season on field goals, and there's been a couple extra points that have been very close to being missed as well. So he has got to right the ship. He has been dreadful here early in the season. And a couple of these missed field goals have not been 50-plus yarders. They've been chip shots for NFL kickers. So Jason Myers has got to do a better job. They got to get that on track. I don't know if the new long snapper's playing into that. The snaps look good to me, but maybe it's just a timing thing. One of the misses today, even if the uprights were 30 feet further apart, I don't think it would have been it. It was way wide left. So he's not struggling. He is really struggling mightily right now. They need to get him back on track because he is a crucial part of this team. They need him to kick like he did last year because I think they're going to be in a lot of close games. They're going to be decided a lot of times by 3, 5, 6 points. You need your kicker to be on point, and so far, Jason Myers has not been. On the defensive side of the football, the 2 players that make it, I did not put any offensive players today because I thought the O-line played really well. The running backs, yards per carry were not there, but there were some really nice runs from Ken Walker III as well as Zach Charbonnet. But on defense, there were a few players that jumped out to me that struggled. And Daryl Taylor, he got to start today with Boye Mafe being inactive, and he had a boneheaded late hit on Jared Goff. He should have been able to call off the horses on that one, and it ended up giving an automatic first down to the Lions. There was a play on their opening scoring drive where Daryl Taylor was in the backfield, had a chance to bring down David Montgomery for a 3-yard loss, and it turned into a 6-yard gain because he missed the tackle. One of their touchdowns, they got him sealed inside. He just hasn't made the strides defending the run that you would expect, and if he's not contributing as a pass rusher, then it creates a problem because that run defense really is a hindrance. So I'd like to see that get fixed up. And we've been seeing this now for a few years. And teams, they're smart. They keep running the ball at him when he's in the game because he has not been able to set the edge, and he misses a lot of tackles. We saw both those things today. So they're hoping they can get Boye Mafe back next week. And obviously Taylor's got a lot of value as a pass rusher, but didn't do much in that regard today either. It was a rough game for number 52. And in the secondary, Kobe Bryant had a couple more missed tackles in this football game, and I felt like Detroit was able to pick on him on 3rd down several times today, playing that slot position. He got to play a few times out of the boundary, and Jared Goff went right after him. So that is still a position that I think the Seahawks are going to have to do some evaluating here. It looks like Devin Witherspoon is going to be the starter at left corner. They started him there today. He's your top 5 pick. But if he's not going to be playing in the slot, is Kobe Bryant your guy there? Or do you consider moving Trey Brown in there? That is something they have not tried at this point, but Brown has made enough splashy plays that he needs to be on the field somehow. So I'm just wondering if that's what they're going to do. Maybe Julian Love gets some big nickel snaps in the slot, but Kobe Bryant has struggled a little bit. They're going to have to figure out what to do there. Giving up a lot of receptions, missing tackles. That's something that they're going to have to clean up moving forward. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Corbin Smith NFL. You can subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up on Monday, Rob Rang and I will be teaming up, and we'll have our Monday musings. Make sure you're listening in-depth takeaways from Seattle's win over Detroit at Ford Field. Thanks for listening in. Sorry for this noise here at the very end. Go Hawks.